I couldn't tell you any baseball time when I was in Little League or whatever that got me ready for that moment. Those moments get you ready for this. It's like, and not only that, that's from the mental side.
You know, for me, that it's meant so much putting on that uniform to play on this field for so long and to play in front of these people. I don't know, it's going to be emotional, it's going to be, you know, but I think I'm just so thankful for everything.
You know, just getting the word out, spreading the word about people to register, it changed people's lives. I mean, at halftime, you saw exactly what a simple act, a selfless act can do. And, you know, so many times people look at us as athletes and they call us heroes. And I think at halftime, you saw a real hero, somebody just taking the time and changing a family's life.
Nomar Garciaparra once named his 8 most loyal MLB teammates, and one name on that list made people say he's the GOAT without even blinking. But before we get to the names, before we get to the loyalty and the brotherhood and all the warmth that came with it, we have to talk about the hurt. Because you cannot understand what loyalty meant to Nomar Garciaparra without first understanding what disloyalty felt like. And in the summer of 2004, he found out exactly what that felt like. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. On July 31st, 2004, the Boston Red Sox traded Nomar Garciaparra to the Chicago Cubs. Just like that. One of the most beloved players in Red Sox history. A man who had given that franchise everything since 1996. Gone. Moved out in the middle of a season like a piece of furniture that no longer fit the room. People who covered the team called it a divorce. Nomar himself used that word. A divorce, because that is what it was. Not just a roster move. A severing of something that had felt permanent. A rupture in a bond that an entire city had believed in. He did not watch the 2004 playoffs. He could not do it. He sat out the whole thing. And when the Red Sox finally won the World Series that October, ending 86 years of heartbreak for an entire region, Nomar was not in the building. He did not celebrate with the guys. He received his World Series ring quietly, in private, at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Not at Fenway Park. Not with thousands of fans screaming his name. Alone. With a ring that carried both pride and pain in equal measure. But here is the part people always forget. Business broke his heart. People did not. The front office made a calculation. But the men inside that clubhouse, the ones who had grounded out with him, year after year through injuries and playoff losses and the crushing weight of Boston expectations, those men never abandoned him. And that loyalty, the kind built inside dugouts and training rooms and early morning batting practice sessions, that loyalty lasted long after the trade, long after the ring ceremony at Wrigley, long after all of it. If you love stories like this one, do me a favor right now. Use the hype feature and give this video some hype. It is a small thing that makes a huge difference for this channel, and it helps us keep bringing you the stories that live underneath the surface of the game. This is one of those stories. This is the story of 8 people who stood by Nomar Garciaparra when standing by someone cost something. We are counting them down from number 8 to number 1. We start at the end of the list and work our way toward the most loyal teammate Nomar ever had. Let us go. Number 8, Mia Hamm. She is on this list, and she belongs here more than almost anyone else. Nomar Garciaparra's wife, Mia Hamm, is the ultimate life teammate. She was never in the dugout. She never turned a double play or dug in against a 95-mile-per-hour fastball. But she was the foundation beneath everything Nomar accomplished and everything he survived. When people talk about what makes a great career possible, they usually talk about talent and preparation and coaching. But very rarely do they talk about the person at home, the one who absorbs the pressure when you cannot carry it anymore. For Nomar, that person was Mia. Mia Hamm was, until Abby Wambach came along, the most productive goal scorer in the history of international soccer. She was not just famous, she was transcendent. She had faced her own version of the spotlight, her own version of the crowd that builds you up and tears you down depending on the week. She knew what it meant to be the symbol of something larger than yourself. She knew what it cost. And because she knew, she could sit across the table from Nomar and understand his situation in a way that almost no one else in his life could match. Their bond was rooted in shared experience at the very pinnacle of athletic performance. 2 people who had both felt the specific loneliness of being elite, of being so good at something that ordinary life starts to feel distant and strange. That shared experience created a depth of understanding between them that gave Nomar something he desperately needed when things got hard. Someone who truly got it. Not just someone who supported him from the outside, someone who had lived a version of it herself. Their connection also ran through something deeper than sports. They shared a Mexican-American heritage. Nomar's father, Ramon, had built their family around a strong sense of identity and the importance of staying close to who you are when the world tries to tell you who you should be. That cultural foundation was something Mia shared and honored. It gave Nomar a stable center that no trade and no media narrative could reach. He knew who he was. And the reason he kept knowing who he was, even through the worst of it, was the person he built his life with. After his playing days ended, Nomar transitioned into broadcasting and became a thoughtful, respected voice in the sport. He carried himself with grace and warmth and genuine engagement. People who interact with him consistently describe him as likable and grounded. That is not just character. That is also evidence of a man who had a solid life outside of baseball, holding everything together for him. Throughout their marriage, Nomar became one of the loudest advocates for women's sports in the entire baseball world. That advocacy was a direct expression of his loyalty to Mia and to her legacy. He did not do it for attention. He did not do it because it was good for his image. He did it because he believed in it. And the reason he believed in it was the woman he had built his life beside. That is the definition of a life teammate. And that is why Mia Hamm is on this list. Number 7, Andre Ethier. When Nomar Garciaparra arrived in Los Angeles with the Dodgers in 2006, his relationship to the game had changed. He was no longer the protected player. He was now the protector. He was the veteran, the experienced voice, the one who had walked through fire in Boston and come out the other side with lessons that could not be found in any manual or coaching session. And he had a choice to make. He could use his remaining years to quietly extend his career and focus only on himself. Or he could do what someone had once done for him. He could invest in a younger player who needed what he had to give. Nomar chose to invest. The player who received that investment was Andre Ethier. Ethier was a young outfielder in the early stages of carving out a legitimate role on the Dodgers roster. The talent was obvious, but talent is never the whole equation in a major market. Los Angeles demands more than performance. It demands presence. It demands the ability to handle a media environment that is sophisticated and demanding and always watching. Ethier had not yet developed all of those tools. Nomar had spent years building exactly those tools in the hardest possible environment, Boston, and he recognized in Ethier a younger version of someone who needed guidance before the city could swallow them whole. So Nomar sat with him, he talked to him, he talked. He taught him what people in baseball call the pro code, the collection of professional habits and mental frameworks that allow a talented player to become a lasting one. How to prepare for the long season, how to keep your focus on the things you can control, how to separate the noise of the outside world from the work happening inside the lines. These are the lessons that separate a good player from a great one, and Nomar gave them freely to Ethier. Ethier later gave Nomar direct credit for helping shape who he became as a professional. That kind of tribute does not come from a transactional relationship. That comes from something genuine, something that required real time and real attention and real care from the older player toward the younger one. Nomar gave all three to Ethier even while his own body was fighting against him, even while chronic injuries were slowly limiting what he could do on the field. In 2006, despite all of that physical difficulty, Nomar had one of the most meaningful seasons of his later career. He made his 6th and final All-Star team that year. He won the National League Comeback Player of the Year award, and while he was producing at that level, he was simultaneously pouring into Ethier. That dual commitment to his own performance and to a younger player's growth shows exactly who Nomar was as a teammate. The Dodgers were in a transitional period under manager Joe Torre. Torre had previously managed the Yankees, Nomar's rivals for years, but Torre valued old-school professionalism above almost everything else, and Nomar personified that professionalism completely. His presence in that clubhouse set a tone. His mentorship of Ethier was the most visible expression of that tone. Nomar once acknowledged at a team event that his teammates had shown up on a day off, and he said plainly that days off were like gold to players and that their presence meant a great deal to him. That level of genuine appreciation for people's time and effort was the spirit that animated his relationship with Ethier. It was about showing up for someone else, and Ethier felt it. The generosity Nomar showed in those Dodgers years was a full-circle moment. He had received it from Vaughn. He passed it to Andre Ethier. Number 6. Jeff Kent. There are many different kinds of loyalty. Some are loud and visible, some exist in gestures and speeches and public support, and then there is the kind of loyalty that Jeff Kent offered to Nomar Garciaparra. Quiet, unspoken, built entirely on a shared understanding of how the world works and a mutual decision to protect each other from the parts of it that do not matter. Jeff Kent was known throughout his career as a difficult personality for media and management to work with. He had a reputation for being blunt, for having no patience with the celebrity theater that professional sports had become. He came to the ballpark to play baseball. He was not interested in becoming a brand. He was not interested in managing his public image or giving quotable answers or performing warmth for cameras. He was there to win, and that was the beginning and the end of his professional identity. That attitude rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but it made perfect sense to Nomar Garciaparra. Nomar had spent his final years in Boston increasingly frustrated by the sense that his priorities were no longer valued by the organization. He had watched the media turn on him when his Achilles injury kept him out of games. He had felt the cold wind of a front office that was building something new and did not quite know what to do with him. All of that had sharpened in Nomar a deep instinct for self-preservation through internal focus. Stop looking outward. Stop caring about the outside noise. Lock in on the work and let the work speak. Jeff Kent had been practicing that same philosophy his entire career. When they shared the Dodgers clubhouse, the two of them formed what can only be described as a professional alliance. They did not need to have long conversations about it. They recognized something in each other immediately, a kindred spirit, a fellow traveler on the road of being misunderstood by everyone who could not see past the surface. Their loyalty was a pact of silence, an agreement that the only opinions worth having were those of the men inside the room. The fans outside did not vote. The reporters did not play. The only scorecard that mattered was the one kept inside the walls of professional baseball. And inside those walls, both men were respected. Both men were prepared. Both men showed up every single day ready to compete. That shared internal focus allowed both of them to perform at a high level into their mid-30s. When the world outside was dismissing them as older players past their prime, they were protecting each other from that narrative by simply refusing to engage with it. That is a specific kind of loyalty, the kind that does not require applause because it does not even face the audience. Kent had won an MVP award during his career. He understood what it meant to peak and to carry that peak forward against the tide of age. He and Nomar were two men guarding the same flame, quietly, together. Number 5, Derek Lowe. To understand the loyalty between Derek Lowe and Nomar Garciaparra, you have to understand where both of them came from. Not just geographically, organizationally. Both men arrived in Boston via the Seattle Mariners. Not at the same time, and not through the same circumstances, but through the same pipeline. And both men, over the course of their careers with the Red Sox, came to represent the same era, the pre-championship era, the era defined by near misses and heartbreak, and the specific kind of hope that only comes from a city that has been waiting too long. Lowe's transformation in Boston was extraordinary. He came in as a relief pitcher and rebuilt himself into a frontline starting pitcher. That kind of reinvention requires an enormous amount of internal discipline and the willingness to be seen failing on the way to succeeding. Lowe did that work. He became important to that team. He became part of the core. And then 2004 arrived, and everything began to feel unstable. He struggled with his consistency on the mound. He spent time in the bullpen. And all around him, the organization was shifting in ways that made the veterans feel like the ground was moving under their feet. While Lowe was navigating his own professional uncertainty, Nomar was sitting at the center of trade rumors and dealing with injuries that the media had decided to treat as a character flaw rather than a physical reality. Both of them understood the particular loneliness of being a valued player who had started to feel like a question mark. That shared experience did not need to be articulated. It was just understood. And from that understanding, something durable grew. Lowe later reflected on the 2004 season and made a point of redirecting credit away from the narrative around the Nomar trade. He said the turnaround came from the rotation putting together roughly 30 quality starts in a row. That is a man who honors the work rather than the storyline. That is a man who has his priorities straight. And that orientation toward the work over the narrative is exactly what he and Nomar shared. Their loyalty was not sentimental, it was practical and grounded. Two men who respected each other's professional commitment and understood each other's frustrations without needing a long explanation. When Lowe left Boston after the 2004 season and headed to Los Angeles, he said the hardest part was leaving the friendships he had built. Nomar was central to those friendships, and in a detail that fits neatly, both men eventually ended up with the Dodgers, continuing a connection that had started in the pressure cooker of Fenway Park. Even the endings of their Boston stories had symmetry. Lowe won the clinching game of all 3 playoff series in the 2004 postseason. He was the last pitcher standing at the end of the greatest October in Red Sox history. And Nomar got his ring quietly at Wrigley. Two men who gave Boston their best years. Two men who experienced the celebration of that era in completely different ways. And through all of it, their bond held. Number 4, Trot Nixon. Trot Nixon was not the most talented player on those Red Sox rosters. He was not the most celebrated. He did not win batting titles or Cy Young awards or MVP trophies. What he had was something different, something that cannot be manufactured and cannot be faked. He had an almost ferocious level of commitment to doing the work the right way every single day. He had grit. Real, unadorned, unapologetic grit. And that is why Nomar respected him so completely. Nixon was part of the same homegrown core as Nomar. Both had come through the organization together in the mid-1990s. Both had been developed by the same coaches, shaped in the same system, and forged in the same pressure of a city that did not suffer mediocrity quietly. They grew up as professionals together, in the best sense of that phrase. And that shared origin created a loyalty that ran beneath the surface of anything that could be seen in box scores or highlight packages. The dirt dog identity that Trot Nixon carried was more than a nickname. It was a philosophy. You played hard. You played through pain. You dove when you needed to dive and you slid when you needed to slide. And at the end of the game, your uniform looked like evidence of a battle because that is exactly what it was. Nixon finished games covered in grass stains and dirt, and he wore all of it proudly. That mentality resonated with Nomar on a deep level. Nomar had his own version of it. His pre-pitch routine alone was famous for the physical intensity it demanded. His swing mechanics were so powerful and so demanding that they put consistent strain on his entire body over the course of a career. He was giving everything every single time. Nixon recognized that in him. Two men who understood what it meant to leave everything on the field. The moment that crystallized their friendship for many observers came on July 1st, 2004. Nomar was on the bench that day, held out of the lineup due to his Achilles tendon injuries. In that same game, a pop fly off the bat of Trot Nixon became the occasion for Derek Jeter to make one of the most famous heads-up plays of his career, diving into the stands to make the catch. Fenway responded with admiration for Jeter's effort, and in the days that followed, some of that admiration curdled into frustration directed at Nomar, who was sitting on the bench while the opposing shortstop was flying through the air for his team. The frustration was not entirely fair. Nomar's injuries were real. His preparation to return was genuine, but the optics were difficult and the crowd was looking for someone to blame. Nixon knew the real story. He had seen the work Nomar put in behind the scenes, in the training room, in early morning sessions, in the quiet preparation that never made the headlines. He had watched Nomar wage a daily physical war just to keep himself in a position to play. And when the crowd turned, Nixon did not join them. He stayed. He remained one of Nomar's most vocal defenders inside the clubhouse. That is the test of loyalty. Not what you do when things are easy. What you do when standing beside someone is inconvenient or unpopular. Nixon passed that test every time. Number 3, Pedro Martinez. There are teammates, and then there are brothers. Pedro Martinez was a brother. The loyalty between Pedro and Nomar was something that defined not just their relationship, but the entire identity of those Red Sox teams during the most electric years of that franchise's modern history. From 1998 through 2004, Nomar and Pedro were the two names that Boston fans said in the same breath. They were the engine and the heart of the same machine. On nights when Pedro was pitching, the city held its breath waiting for something historic. And in the lineup before and after him, Nomar was doing his own version of the extraordinary. Back-to-back batting titles in 1999 and 2000. An average of .357 in one of those years with 27 home runs and 104 runs batted in. The following year, he hit .372. At the same time, Pedro was posting seasons that baseball historians still study with a kind of reverence. A 1.74 ERA in 2000. Strikeout totals that seemed impossible. A WHIP that still makes advanced metrics look up and take notice. These two men were performing at the absolute ceiling of human athletic ability at the exact same moment. That does not happen often, and when it does, it creates a bond unlike anything else. Their peaks were not just simultaneous, they were symbiotic. Pedro's ability to shut down opposing offenses gave the Red Sox lineup room to breathe, and Nomar's consistent run production gave Pedro the support he needed to keep his win totals historically high. They were not just playing alongside each other, they were elevating each other. That kind of performance symbiosis creates a depth of mutual respect that ordinary professional admiration simply cannot reach. Their closeness showed in the way they interacted in the clubhouse. Nomar was one of the very few teammates who felt comfortable enough to prank Pedro, who was known for his intensity and his competitive fire. The story of Nomar tying Pedro to a dugout pole to keep him from storming onto the field in the middle of an inning tells you everything about the depth of that friendship. You do not do that to an acquaintance. You do not do that to a teammate you merely respect. You do that to someone you trust completely, someone who knows you well enough to know that what you are doing comes from love. Pedro took it that way, and that capacity to be playful with each other in the middle of the pressure cooker of a pennant race is a mark of genuine brotherhood. When the front office began to pursue a trade for Alex Rodriguez in the years leading up to 2004, tensions around Nomar's place on the team began to build. Pedro was one of the veterans who stood publicly with Nomar. He made it clear to anyone listening that Nomar was valued and that the team needed him. When the trade happened anyway, Pedro felt the loss personally. He had been one of Nomar's primary supports through everything, and the departure hit him hard. His response to it showed exactly who he was. When Orlando Cabrera arrived to play shortstop in Nomar's place, Pedro pulled him aside and gave him a piece of advice that had taken 7 years to earn. He told Cabrera to do the interviews, but to never read a paper in Boston. That was wisdom forged through 7 seasons of navigating the Boston media machine alongside Nomar. Pedro passed that torch to the next shortstop. He handed along the survival guide that he and Nomar had written together over all those years. That is what it means to honor a friendship even after the physical circumstances of it have changed. Number 2, Jason Varitek. To understand the loyalty between Jason Varitek and Nomar Garciaparra, you have to go back before either of them ever put on a major league uniform. You have to go back to Atlanta, Georgia, to the campus of the Georgia Institute of Technology, to 1994, when 2 young baseball players were leading the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets toward the College World Series title game and building something between them that would last for the rest of their careers. In 1994, the Georgia Tech roster was loaded. 4 players from that team would eventually be taken in the first round of the draft. But Varitek and Nomar were in a category by themselves. They were the undisputed leaders of that program. Varitek, playing catcher, was one of the best college baseball players in the country. He won the Golden Spikes Award that year, given to the top amateur player in the United States. He won the Dick Howser Trophy. He finished his college career with a .384 batting average, first all-time in program history, and 57 home runs, also first all-time. Nomar's college numbers matched that ambition, a .372 career average, 7th all-time at Georgia Tech. Both were first-round picks, both were exceptional. Both of them knew what the other was made of before either of them had ever faced a major league pitcher. That shared foundation created something rare, a shorthand, a mutual expectation of excellence that did not need to be explained or negotiated, because it had already been established through 2-a-day practices and College World Series pressure, and the specific crucible of competing at the highest level of amateur baseball together. When Varitek arrived in Boston via the 1997 trade from the Seattle Mariners, the same deal that brought Derek Lowe to town, the reunion was immediate and effortless. They already knew each other in the way that matters most. They knew how the other worked. Columnist Dan Shaughnessy gave Varitek the nickname True North, a description of the catcher's unwavering moral and professional compass, and it fit perfectly. While Nomar was the face of the franchise, the name on everyone's lips, the player the cameras followed and the crowd screamed for, Varitek was its spine. He was the structural support that everything else rested on. His meticulous preparation in studying opposing hitters fed directly into Nomar's defensive positioning. Their shared approach to the game, the relentless preparation, the refusal to cut corners, the commitment to showing up fully every single day, became the standard by which every other player on that roster was judged. By 2003, Varitek had grown into the acknowledged leader of the team. The role became official in 2004 when he was named the 3rd captain in Red Sox history since 1923. People sometimes talk about that captaincy as the start of a new era, but what it actually was the continuation of the Nomar-era values, carried forward by the man who had always been their co-architect. The trade that sent Nomar to Chicago did not erase that foundation. It revealed how deep it went. Varitek took those values straight into the championship season. The loyalty between them was not disrupted by the business decision. Varitek honoring the standard they had built together was itself an act of loyalty. Number 1. Vaughn. Every great chain of loyalty has a first link. For Nomar Garciaparra, that first link was Maurice Samuel Vaughn. And Vaughn belongs at the top of this list because what he did for Nomar was not just personal, it was foundational. It shaped every other relationship that followed. It defined the template. It created the pro code that Nomar would carry with him and pass on to others for the rest of his career. When Nomar walked into the Red Sox clubhouse for the first time on August 31st, 1996, he was stepping into one of the most intense sporting environments in North America. Fenway Park is not a forgiving place. The Boston media is not a gentle institution. The Boston Globe and the Boston Herald both maintained beat writers whose coverage could shift a fan base's opinion of a player within a single series. The city loved hard and it turned hard. And the Red Sox were in a moment of significant transition. Roger Clemens was gone. The rosters that had defined the previous generation were aging out. There was a vacuum of leadership in that clubhouse, and it was waiting to be filled. Vaughn filled it. He had won the American League MVP award in 1995, the year before Nomar arrived. He was the biggest presence in that room by every measure. His physical presence was enormous. His personality was enormous. His voice in that clubhouse carried weight. When Vaughn spoke, people listened. And when Vaughn decided that his primary responsibility was to protect the young shortstop with the enormous upside and the focused eyes, nobody questioned it. Vaughn made himself the lightning rod. Every question from a reporter that might have gone to Nomar, Vaughn stepped in front of. Every piece of critical narrative that the press was building around the new generation of Red Sox players, Vaughn absorbed personally. He put himself between Nomar and the machine, not because anyone asked him to, not because there was a strategy meeting where this was decided, because he understood what the pro code demanded. He had come up in this game and he had seen what happened to talented young players who got consumed too early by the spotlight. and he was not going to let that happen to Nomar Garciaparra. The scope of that mentorship went beyond managing the media. Vaughn taught Nomar the practical mechanics of surviving a 162-game season, how to handle the fans who only showed up in your corner when the numbers were good, how to navigate the adversarial dynamic between player and press in a market that treated its athletes like public property, how to stay focused on the work when everything around you was designed to pull you away from it. That last element is worth dwelling on. Vaughn's own contract situation with the Red Sox front office under general manager Dan Duquette was a source of real frustration throughout this period. Duquette and Vaughn were not aligned. The negotiations were contentious. The relationship was strained, and a lesser man might have let that bitterness bleed into everything around him. Vaughn did not. He kept his frustration with management entirely separate from his relationship with Nomar. He compartmentalized with a discipline that most people cannot manage. He never let Nomar feel the weight of his personal situation with the front office. He just kept showing up for the younger player every single day. He kept the environment around Nomar clean. That level of selflessness, choosing to absorb your own pain so that someone else can grow unimpeded, is one of the rarest things in all of sports. The result of all that protection was a unanimous Rookie of the Year award in 1997. Every vote, not a majority, every single one. Nomar was the best rookie in the American League, and the entire baseball world agreed without hesitation. That consensus did not happen in a vacuum. It happened because Vaughn had created the conditions in which Nomar could develop without distraction, without the kind of early media pressure that derails careers before they fully begin. Vaughn built the greenhouse. Nomar grew inside it. When Vaughn left Boston for the Anaheim Angels in 1999, the formal apprenticeship was over, but the lessons never left. The pro code that Vaughn had modeled for 3 years was now Nomar's own. It was part of how he saw the world and how he treated the people around him. And you can trace that code forward through every relationship on this list. The way Nomar protected the clubhouse environment, the way Vaughn once protected him, the way he stood by teammates when the pressure mounted, the way he eventually sat down with Ethier in Los Angeles and passed along the same unwritten rules he had first learned from a big first baseman in Boston. The chain of loyalty that runs through this entire list starts with Mo Vaughn. Everything else grew from that original seed. Mo Vaughn is number one because loyalty always has to begin somewhere, because someone has to be the first person willing to give before there is anything to gain. That is what Vaughn did for Nomar Garciaparra, and the echo of that generosity can be heard in every single name on this list. Now, let us land this where it belongs. The July 31st, 2004 trade was not just a roster move. It was the end of an era. The man who had been the face of the franchise since 1996, who had won a unanimous Rookie of the Year award, who had won 2 batting titles, who had given Fenway Park some of its most electric moments, was sent to Chicago because a new front office was building something different. The organization called it a business decision. Nomar called it a divorce. And that word matters. It matters because it tells you how much was real. He did not watch the 2004 playoffs. He stayed away. He could not watch the games he had spent years fighting toward. And when the Red Sox won the World Series, when 86 years of heartbreak finally ended, Nomar was not there. He received his ring quietly in private at Wrigley Field in Chicago, not in front of the faithful, not with a standing ovation, alone, with a ring that meant everything and cost him something real to hold. Here is what the trade could not take. It could not take Mo Vaughn's lessons. It could not reach Varitek's steady presence, or Pedro's brotherhood, or Trot Nixon's unwavering defense, or Derek Lowe's shared grief, or Jeff Kent's silent solidarity, or Ethier's gratitude, or Mia Hamm's grounding love. The business of baseball can end a contract. It cannot dissolve what was built inside those walls. In 2010, Nomar Garciaparra signed a one-day contract to retire as a Boston Red Sox. He did not have to do that, but he chose to end where he began. He put the uniform back on one final time, because even after the trade, even after the hurt, even after the private ring ceremony at a ballpark in Chicago, the loyalty he felt for that organization and those men never disappeared. It went underground for a while, and when it surfaced again in 2010, it came back as peace, as a man choosing to close the circle on his own terms. That is what this list of 8 people truly represents, a map of where his peace came from. 8 people who made sure that when the business of baseball tried to reduce him to a transaction, there was still something standing, something real that no front office calculation could reach. Loyalty in baseball is not always loud. Sometimes it appears as a veteran standing in front of a camera so a rookie can breathe. Sometimes it appears as a catcher studying film until midnight, so his shortstop can position himself better on defense. Sometimes it appears in a husband and wife who both know what it costs to be great, holding onto each other through the seasons that test everything. And sometimes it appears as a group of 8 people spread across different teams in different decades, all of them carrying a piece of the same man's story forward with them long after the final out. Nomar Garciaparra named 8 people, Every single one of them earned their place on this list without any question. If you want more stories like this one, hit like and subscribe right now so you never miss another episode of Baseball Icons. Drop a comment below and tell us who your most loyal teammate pick would be. We read every single one. And if you have not used the hype feature yet, give this video some hype right now. It is the best thing you can do for this channel, and it helps us keep making content that goes deeper than the surface of the game. I am Mason. This has been Baseball Icons. We will absolutely see you in the next one.